All right, well, we're recording, so now would be a really great time to say something funny, like a little bit of an outtake.
But hold on 1 second, because I've got a substance problem that I need to take care of.
Okay.
Okay.
Did you take care of your substance problem?
I still have this. I mean, yeah.
Is it poop?
No, it's it's the thing that I said I was gonna give up in the last episode. That I'm actually upping right now. I'm going from green tea to black tea, so I'm like completely defying God.
Wow. Good luck with that.
Yeah, it ties into our show, faux show.
Why are you going up to black tea right now?
Well, I don't know if we want to get into the show right now, but because I don't want to feel something.
Okay.
I'm just not in the mood, you know? I'm just not in the mood.
No, you want to feel something else. You want to feel that black tea rush. You want to feel that thrill of life.
Yeah.
I understand. It's a good one.
It's a thrill. It's better than this like, oh, it's Sunday. What am I gonna do after this? That feeling.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, well, if I drink this, then after the show, I've got lots to do. Welcome to How to Be an Okay Person. I'm Lindsay Chrysler.
I am Robbie Carlton.
And today we've got a show for you.
So welcome to the Tea Drinkers Anonymous show.
Well, we're going to use this as an example in our show today.
Yeah, this is a good example.
Because I am example A of the topic that we are going to get into today.
What are we talking about today, Lance?
Well, we're going to talk about two things that we constantly talk about. It's a super important map that we use. I use it every day. Both things I probably refer to every day. And I wouldn't call this the most uplifting show we're going to have.
Yes, in fact, I mean, the title of the show is almost certainly going to be The Down. And
in that voice.
Yeah, and that's the main subject. We're going to be talking about The Down. And it's funny because as we were prepping, we had different, like, I was saying, I feel like we should, like, warn people that this episode might be a little rough, like emotionally, and you had a difference.
I do. I think it's a typological thing, which we'll do a show about that. I have figured out a way to take this incredibly depressing topic and use it for my like growth and exhilaration. So if you learn how to go down, guess what? You can go even higher up.
Okay.
So there is a silver lining to this show that I will try to represent no matter how much Robbie talks.
but seriously, you know, it's not to kind of this is a topic that just gets into some of the heavier experiences of being a human. And hopefully when you listen to the show, it's not going to leave you crashed and hopeless. But it's actually going to leave you feeling more resourceful in some of these more difficult places.
Yes.
How about that?
That sounds great. It really, like, learning is a bit of a buzzkill, and then I find it has given me way more freedom and range and love of myself. So I think there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Great.
So let's go into the tunnel.
She says cheerfully. So, all right, I want to do just a little bit of history because I like to do this. So we both learnt this from Nicole thedown. I learned also from some of her students originally, and then one of their recommendations was a book that, as far as I can tell, they got it from. At least this book kind of has the same ideas wholesale, and it's an amazing book. It's called On Becoming an Alchemist. It's by Catherine McCune, and we'll put a link in the show notes, which, by the way, you can see the show notes either on the website, howtobeanokayperson.com, or in your podcast player. We've never actually explained the show notes. If you listen to a lot of podcasts, you probably know what they are, but if you don't, every show comes with some notes, and typically they're going to be links, extra stuff that we want to share with you, so you can find that on your podcast player or on the website. Okay, so in the show notes, we're going to link to this book, On Becoming an Alchemist. But this book is I want to talk about the book for a minute because I absolutely love it. It's very, very strange. It's
Hmm.
very, very strange. Have you read it? You've read it, yeah.
I've read half. Yeah.
Okay.
Aw.
So at the time I was studying with this teacher Rob Candell, and he recommended this book to me, and I respected him, and so I was reading this book, but it just seemed like total nonsense. I'm like, Rob, why are you making me read this book? It had like she has angels, different spirits, like all this just kind of completely out there wacky stuff. At the time, for me, this
That
was like,
was, I'm so surprised to hear you say that it was totally out there for you when you
oh
read
my
that.
god, yeah, yeah, yeah. At that
It
time,
it did not occur to me that way at all. I was like, okay,
yeah. Well, you and I have different maps about
that's true.
spiritual things. I mean, my idea of spirituality at that time was pretty much reality is intrinsically inexplicable and awe-inspiring. And if you practice training your attention, you can achieve kind of very high emotional states.
Ah, well said.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't know how much further I've got from that. I think that it's still a lot of how I experience spirituality. Except I don't know. I'm just much more open minded to weird stuff now. But at that time, very very weird. Angels, spirits, like in communication with beings, like weird like alchemical texts. And he's called On Becoming Alchemist, and she starts off with this completely inexplicable story, which I've read this book 5 or 6 times now, and this
Wow.
at the beginning of this story, she at the beginning of the book she tells this alchemical story. It's this incredibly dense, metaphorical story about I don't know what, about this guy, and he gets married to someone, and he finds something, and he buries it, and he digs it up, and like, and at the end she says, this story, it's difficult to understand conceptually, but it works on you. And keep thinking about it, because the thinking about it is part of what works on you. And to this day, I read that story, I have no idea. Like, I have no idea what she's talking about in that story. But anyway, so I read this book, and I was baffled by it, but I kept going. And what I noticed when I read this book is it really, my rational mind has a lot to say about it. It's pretty kind of difficult to swallow. And I come away from the book, and every time I read it, I have like a deeper, more direct and visceral experience of the subtle realm, is the easiest way I can say it, where I can feel subtle energy more clearly.
Mm.
And that's just really consistent when I read this book. Different books have different transmissions like that, and this book, the main thing that it actually transmits, in my experience, is a attunement to the subtle. However, it also goes into the subject of the down, which is what we're going to get into now. There was a little diversion, a little book review. I love that book. Go out and read it if you want to trip. Did you like it?
I loved it. I don't remember feeling that way at all when you. I would like to read it again now and see if that's the transmission I got. It was another one of those books that gave me a huge permission slip to be myself. I was like, oh, great. Okay, let's do this.
Mm.
And I love maps. I mean, she gives you maps. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, I liked it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I finished it. But
I'll just say that the second half is way easier to digest than the first half. So if you're having a really hard time with the first half, the second half, it starts to make more sense. It starts to become more psychologically applicable. Like, she gets into more of a map, which you must have got some ways into.
I think so, yeah. I may have finished it. I just don't remember.
All right, so that's a history. That's a little bit of background of where does this idea come from.
The down.
And the down. And, what we're talking about. I mean, how would you characterize it?
Well, I think the up and the down. I think of it as the opposite of the up and the down. It's an experience of slowing down. It's a felt experience. I think this is a map of a felt experience of my life, myself, my life. So this is a map of the things that we're feeling, and you go from up, which is kind of for me, it's like a faster gear that you are driving in, and you're going somewhere, and you switch gears, and you're actually in neutral or slower gear than that even exists in the car analogy, and you have no idea where you're going, and it takes you where it wants to go. So the other way I think about it a lot is the feminine and the masculine map. So the down is the feminine, the up is the masculine.
Yeah. How I would talk about the up and the down is like part of life is cyclical. So there's a developmental part of life where, you grow, you learn things, you change, you develop, hopefully, wisdom and kind of you learn to know yourself better and be more in rapport with yourself. All of these things. That part is developmental, and there's also a part of life which is cyclical, where things kind of go around in cycles, and the basic cycle is this up down cycle, where if you think about a wave, it's like a wave, right? It goes up, it reaches a peak, and then what happens next is it goes down, and then it hits a valley, and then what happens next? It goes back up and it reaches another peak and it goes down. Sometimes the waves are like little shallow waves, little peaks, little valleys, kind of, and then sometimes the peaks and valleys are really huge. It's actually fractal, so that like you might be in like a big peak in your life, but a little down of the day. And so you have these like waves within waves. But to kind of say like, what is it, right? And I think like your description fits for me, like absolutely. And that this up is like you're high, you're happy, you're excited, you're enthusiastic, like you're kind of outward facing, like you want to create, you want to produce, you want to interact, and it has this kind of like energy to it, this kind of positive energy. Or you can just be like ecstatic. Maybe it's less kind of like active than that, but you're just like blissed out and ecstatic, or just like having a nice feeling and kind of like cozy or whatever. Although cozy gets a little, I don't think it's cozy, but it could be like
content.
Like you're by yourself, content, or you're by yourself and you're on the mountain and you're struck by the beauty of the mountain in this kind of like awe-inspiring way. So it doesn't have to be like social, but it just has this like up positive energy quality. And the down is, and it's bright and it's light. So these are kind of just qualitative, like feelings about it. It tends to be fast. It doesn't have to be fast. But it's like a high vibration. The down is low energy. It's slower, as Lindsay said. It's kind of cooler and darker. Although it can also be warm, but it has this like kind of sometimes womb-like quality of, and it's a time when you're feeling less outwardly creative. You're feeling less like you have something to put into the world, but more like you kind of need to tend to yourself. And this is when you're doing it well. It's like you're tending to yourself, and you're kind of getting cozy, or just like being slow, going for walks and listening to Leonard Cohen, and like taking baths. Like we'll get into all of that. So those are the kind of dimensions. That's the kind of internal dimension to it. There's also an external dimension, which is like you just got a promotion at work, or you just started dating someone and you're really excited about that. Like we're back to the up here. You just started dating someone, you're really excited about that, and you're kind of enthusiastic, and like, or your team is winning in a sport, right? Like something like that, or when you're doing the grid. Like the kind of the attitude of like going to the grid and like, I'm going to make my grid and I'm going to put some checks in it. Even though you might be in a deep down in your life that has you like, I need to get this shit handled. But in that moment of going to the grid, that's an up moment. Like you're moving into an up cycle when you're doing that. So that's another example of kind of like a more external thing. And then like the down is like, somebody has died, a relationship has ended, a job has ended, you're moving house, like you're leaving somewhere. Like leaving is in the down and arriving is in the up. Like, so
or in a more positive way, it can also just be that after something really big just happened and you are digesting or integrating, or you just got married and now like the honeymoon would be a good example of hopefully a down. Or you just launched a program and now you're kind of in bed for the weekend, watching movies and reading books and relaxing to enjoy.
And so that's what you're pointing to there, is the fact that if you have an external up, you then have to have some kind of down.
Yeah.
And it can be an internal down, which is, you've just launched your program. That's an external up. Now I'm going to spend the weekend in bed watching TV. That's an internal down. Like you didn't have to have something in your life crash to bring you down, right? If you don't, and this is part of the reason that we're teaching this topic, and part of the reason it's a really useful distinction, is if you don't let yourself come down, life will bring you down.
Yes.
So that's one of the main takeaways, and one of the reasons why this idea of the down is really important, is if you don't let yourself come down, life will bring you down.
Yes. So it's good to know about this so you can be intentional because, another way of coming down is getting into a car accident, right? And it would be better probably to spend a week meditating and eating good food and taking baths and coming down off this big, amazing experience versus having a car accident and then you're in bed because you can't move your legs.
Right, exactly.
So this is why we want to teach you. Even though it's a little bit of a buzzkill, it's good to learn about it because then you can be intentional and you can actually have the down be super creative and productive, or not productive, super.
See, one of us habitually lives more in the up, and the other habitually lives more in the down. I wonder if you can tell.
You can have a really good time in the down if you learn about this.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not that good of a time, but you got to do it anyway. I want to talk about the normal response to the down, especially in this culture.
Yeah.
So this is the other definition, the other concept that we're talking about today. Okay, so our culture, especially, and people in general, have this response to going down. They have this response to the down, which, and this is something we both learned from another teacher, Carl Buchheit. He calls this response flapping, which is it's just so brilliant. The image is just so brilliant. And so flapping is where you are flapping your wings, trying desperately not to go down. So you got to the peak of one of those waves in your life, either in terms of just an emotional wave or in terms of a
accomplishment.
Yeah, exactly, like a life circumstance, like some external thing that's happened. And you're kind of like, okay, let's just keep going. Like, what's the next thing? So there's this flapping that happens. Flapping is basically any kind of activity, internal or external, whose main purpose is to keep you from going down. Give us some examples of that.
I mean, the example we've talked about with my personal life all the time is the tea. Like I got the message from God to give up tea, which to me, that means that I would be required to go and feel a lot of things, right? Mm-hmm. And so I don't want to do that. So I have started flapping in the face of that message. Mm-hmm. I have researched expensive teaware to make it into more of a ritual. I've spent hours on Google researching really, really fancy decaf tea so that I can still have tea, but not the caffeine. Like I know it's flapping because I'm efforting a lot. Efforting in, I'm not in the flow. I'm efforting to avoid something, actually, to avoid one day where I don't have it because I don't know what I would have to feel, but I imagine it would probably be some kind of, I don't know, actually, but I assume it would be some sort of grief.
Yeah. And so that's a great example. I mean, it's funny. I have a couple of specific examples that are really satisfying. I'm going to tell you. And then at the end of the list of specific examples, I have all of the life. That's one of my examples, which is maybe is a little bit on the dark side. I mean, there's a Leonard Cohen quote. I mean, should we do that Leonard Cohen quote?
Yeah, I mean, he's the king.
He's the king of the down. Just if you want to understand the down, go hang out with Leonard Cohen, who sadly you can no longer do that in the physical world, but you can still listen to his music. And oh my God, like talk about someone who is in rapport with the down and actually makes it beautiful. I actually told this to someone once. I was in a ceremony with someone, and she was having this really hard time crashing because this ceremony was like a little bit like love and light and kind of like up. And she was like, well, I want to create this music, but she was a musician, whenever I make this music, it's just so sad. Like the music I make is so sad, and I don't want to depress people. I don't want to be like a force for this gets into distribution where she was getting like her down amplified because she was in a field where it wasn't really included. And this is another reason why we talk about it and we want to include it, because it's there. You don't get away from it. And this is where some of the kind of some spiritual cultures and just the other cultures get problematic, where they refuse to include the down, and then it gets put out into the shadows. So anyway,
yeah. This is partly why this show was born, because we want to include being an okay person means you travel to both sides of the range. and you can have happiness and joy, and you also are going to feel sad and depressed and confused. And being an okay person is in rapport with all those parts. We're including everything. We don't want to spiritually bypass and get ourselves out of really painful experiences and always be in the up and the high, because it's denying who we are as human beings. So we're saying it's okay. It's okay to go down, and it's okay to feel down. And the down is okay.
Yeah, it's okay. And yeah, exactly. So I said to this woman, she was kind of like, man, I don't want to like depress people. I don't want to bring people down. And I said, listen, like one of the greatest gifts in my life in terms of an artist is Leonard Cohen, who basically he made it okay to go down. And I would listen to Leonard Cohen, and partly it was however dark I felt. There are Leonard Cohen songs that are darker than I have ever felt, like that have just and beautiful, right? And he makes it beautiful.
He does.
And that's a huge gift. So Leonard Cohen, I'm actually going to read a quote because he's just the master. I mean, he welcome to the Downs. So here's Leonard's response to the idea of flapping, I think. He says, this is from an interview, so I'm going to read the quote and then the interview. My mom sent me this. So, hi, Mom. The greatest help you can get from anything is to find out it doesn't work. That's Leonard Cohen. He says, I don't think I was complaining. I was just saying, ouch, because it hurt. I tried everything they had. Like? Well, the things that you mentioned, wine, women, song, money, career, drugs, art, every kind of extravagance, every kind of restraint. And what helped? Everything helped in its way, in the sense that it said, this doesn't work. I think that's the greatest help you can get from anything, is to find out that it doesn't work. Because nothing works. Nothing in this human realm is meant to work. So once you can deeply appreciate that, for one thing, the mind of compassion grows if you understand that everybody's up against it. I remember reading some works of Simone Weil, a French woman who lived in France during the war, and she said there's only one question worth asking anybody, and that question is, what are you going through? So, I think
it's so good.
I mean, it's so good. I want to temper it a little. But I also just want to let it rest and just be like, yes, like, wow. Like, that is a partial perspective, as all perspectives are.
As all they are, yeah.
That is a partial perspective, but it is a partial perspective that brings light. I mean, this is the Leonard Cohen quote everyone quotes, but there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. Mm-hmm. And I think that's speaking to the same thing, right? It's speaking to the down. And I'm going to tell a story later about that. So anyway, all of the life is flapping, but also specifically...
well, it is. I just want to say it is. We're all going to die.
Right.
We are 100% going to die, and everyone we love is going to die. So in one way, you could spend your whole life flapping against that truth. And maybe, I think some people, maybe you on some days would say, and maybe me on some days would say that is what the whole life is. But there's also some other things that I want to talk about too. I think there's also moments of creativity and flow. There's a whole alternative to flapping, but you could spend your whole life flapping against that truth.
Right. Yes. And
this is what you told me after Fight Club.
This is what I told you after Fight Club.
When I was definitely going down.
Yeah, just like in the down.
Because I had spent a whole week flapping, and then you.
I mean, Fight Club. That's a movie about the down, and it's about a movie about letting go of flapping.
So good. That movie was so good. I'm so late to all these parties. But anyway, then so I was crying. I was deeply like snotting into my soup. And what did you say?
I just want to say, if you haven't watched Fight Club, you should watch Fight Club. That's your homework. This kind of sounds a little bit like Trunk Pop, but anyway, this is how I said it. The bad news is nothing can save you. So this is the bad news, and this is what we want to take that flapping away, because nothing can save you. And while you're flapping, what you're really trying to do is save yourself. So the bad news is nothing can save you. The good news is you don't need saving.
Mm-hmm.
But you only get to find that out if you let yourself go down.
Yes.
Like while you're flapping, you are reinforcing the idea that you need saving and that there's something to be saved from.
Right.
So that's the flip side of that's the other part of the I don't think is fully captured in the Leonard quote, because he's just like such an ambassador for the down that he doesn't even want to acknowledge the other side. Like it, and there's a lot of sense to that, and a lot of Buddhist teachers kind of similarly, like they don't want to talk about like the other side. They just want to talk about life is suffering, because that's the part, because otherwise it's just real easy to turn it back into flapping.
Yes, which is the line I'm walking every day.
I mean, everybody. I mean, me too. And I just, at this point, like, we need to give a couple more examples of flapping, but flapping is kind of like just that reaching that, like, something's gonna save me. Like, okay, if I just get like this job, if I get this promotion, if I get the right partner, if I can kind of organize all of my circumstances of my life in just the right way, then I'm gonna be okay. Like this thing is gonna save me. This is gonna save me. I'm gonna be okay. Like that's flapping. And I wanna just have a little room and compassion for flapping as well, right? And this is not like a don't flap, be zen, total freedom. Like it's not like that. It's like you're gonna flap. You're gonna eat a bucket of ice cream one day. You're gonna binge watch television another day, which can be going down, can be flapping, or like you're going to create projects
to save yourself,
and to try and escape from the difficult feelings,
right?
And that's fine. That's fine. Like, through one lens, you could say like the whole grid is like some version of flapping. You
could say some of us are here because our parents were flapping. I mean, maybe I'm the product of flapping. I don't even know.
Right, you're a flap. So, like, welcome to the paradox, right?
Yeah.
And I think you can be aware of it, and I think it's a useful thing to name. Like, and you and I, when we talk about this, it's not like, we just name it, right? Like, it's just like. We name it in our own lives. We name it in the lives of our people, and kind of like what we see and like that. And it's definitely, there isn't like a lot of kind of like judgment, like that this is like somehow morally problematic.
Right.
Like it's not like that. It's just like it's a part of being human, and it's kind of a tricky part. So I want to give some specific examples. One is a little sillier. So Game of Thrones. So I'm sorry, I'm going to do Game of Thrones spoilers for Season 7. I think it's been long enough. If you have not seen Season 7 yet, then...
pause.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to skip ahead and like trust your luck. I don't know. This is probably going to be...
No, pause, go catch up, and then come back and press play, and here we go.
I don't know, because we're going to talk about Patreon at the end, so I kind of want them to get to the end.
I feel like that's just for your mom. Your mom is like the only one we're waiting on to get caught up. Oh, and your dad.
I don't know. There are people listening who maybe haven't even started yet. So anyway, there's going to be a few minutes of a Game of Thrones example. And there are actually multiple examples of this. So Season 7 of Game of Thrones, Episode 4 comes around. Episode 4 is the episode where, after just like a whole bunch of talking, and like Khaleesi talking with Tyrion, and then Jon Snow shows up, and they're all talking away, and then Cersei and Jaime Lannister over there, they're talking, and everybody's just talking and planning and talking and planning, and it's just like the most boring thing ever. And then you have a whole episode which is just more of that, and then at the very end, Khaleesi gets on her dragon and comes and blows some people up, and there's some cool special effects, and there's like pretty cool like 15-minute battle sequence. Game of Thrones is really good. This is a totally different concept. There's a thing called the peak end bias. And the peak end bias is this idea that, and it's been well researched, this is a well documented, this isn't just like some concept, like there's been a lot of research to say this is true, which is that people remember, when people think about an experience, they remember the single strongest emotional kind of moment in that experience, and especially with an emphasis towards the last thing. So if the last thing is a strong, so if there's like a strong emotion in the middle, that's what they'll remember. And if not, then whatever the last thing that they felt, like that's what they'll remember. And they'll code the whole experience with that feeling. And Game of Thrones are masterful at this. They'll do whole seasons which are pretty boring, and then the last 2 episodes knock it out of the park, and you walk away being like, Game of Thrones is amazing. I can't wait till the next season. But if you actually go back and listen and watch the season 6 up till those last 2 episodes, which is spectacular. Season 6 is fine, but it's not like amazing. But we all walked away from season 6 being like, I cannot wait. And so, that episode 4 of season 7, where the dragon comes down and burns all the Lannister army, is another example of a peak and bias, where they just put in enough like juice to satisfy. Anyway, this is just my critique of Game of Thrones. So the next day, I'm just off it. Like, I'm like, oh wow, Game of Thrones is just lost it this season. Like, this is they've lost it. Like, they peaked and they've lost it, and they've got to wind it down, and they have one more season after this one. But like, I didn't even watch the next few episodes. I had to catch up for the end. I was like, I got to catch up, but I like skipped a couple episodes, which has never happened before. But what was bizarre to me was everywhere on Facebook, people were like, best episode ever. Mm-hmm. Like, there were articles about it, there were tweets about it. Like, everybody was saying, greatest episode of Game of Thrones ever, top 3 episode of Game of Thrones. This is amazing. Do you remember this? I'm not just making this up, right?
I remember it. I got text messages from friends, and then it's that awkward moment of not being able to match the world's enthusiasm, because mostly because I had talked to you, but also because I felt it too. I felt myself bored. Like, I felt myself checking out. And then it didn't have the big end scene with the dragon. Like, I love the dragon. It did not have the juice.
Yeah.
And you named it, and you're much better at naming this than I am. I will flap a little longer and with a little more spirit than you, I think.
Which for ill and good.
But you named it, and I remember the next day seeing the kind of deluded crowd of people.
Yeah, people just really like kind of like, and you could feel like this kind of like desperate enthusiasm.
It's got the desperate feeling to it. This efforting kind of awkward.
Like, oh, it's still good, you guys. It's still good. Like, there's this clenching. So I guess we're shaming a little bit, but I can shame people in their response to Game of Thrones. There's like this clenching, desperate
we're not
enthusiasm.
That happens. Like, of course you're gonna do that. Like, and we do that too.
Sure.
But we are going to say, like, there's a clenching and a desperation that does not feel good.
Yes.
Okay.
And then the other example from Game of Thrones from the same season is, and this is like, this maps, and I think you and I have talked about this. Me and Michael Bocelli have talked about this as well. And this maps beautifully that the relationship between Khaleesi and Jon Snow, there's just no juice in it. There's just no sensation.
No energy. No
It's
chemistry,
not sexy.
No
it's
spark.
Just not. It's not sexy. Like, there have been many relationships in Game of Thrones that have been very sexy, that have had the juice, they've had the energy. Jon Snow and Khaleesi, from the moment they were in the same room together, it was just like, yeah, this is completely flat. And but the plot had to have them do the thing.
Do it, yeah.
And what's interesting is people, again, like, writing about like, oh, like, how much chemistry there is. Like, people would write about how much chemistry there is and how sexy it is, and like, okay, they get together and it's like, it's hot, but it's incest, so it's bad, but it's hot. And it's like, I actually don't care about the incest. It's just not hot. Like, there's no nothing. And this is like something that people do in our culture, especially in romantic relationship, is they have a projection of how they think it's supposed to go. And the reason that they needed to go that way is some version of flapping, because that's the way it has to go for me to be okay. And so I'm gonna delete the fact that the juice isn't there and that there isn't really a connection here. There isn't really the juice, and I'm just gonna play out my projection, kind of follow that. And I think it's just really interesting that, like, culturally, like, the fans of Game of Thrones did that in response to Jon Snow and Khaleesi, and it's something that as a culture we do, and that part of where it comes from is like television and Hollywood training us that this thing will save you, and here's how you can tell it. You can tell by the way it looks, because Hollywood is much better at showing you how something looks and how it feels. The best of Hollywood can show you how it feels, but as a kind of like a generality, Hollywood is really good at showing you how it looks, and so we get trained to look for how it looks, and not for how it feels. And so that's just another example of a kind of version of flapping, right? So there's my Game of Thrones examples.
Yes.
And then this is kind of an extension of this, but here's another example. And I don't think everybody does this. I think people have different maps of romantic relationship, but I've definitely done this, which is where you meet someone and you start going up and you're like, ooh, you're excited. You're texting with them and you're going to go on a first date, and you go on that first date and it goes well, and you're kind of like, ooh, so you're going even further up, and then you're texting with them, and like, and like that kind of the stakes start to get high. It starts to be like a little nerve-wracking to be texting with them. Like, are they going to text back? Like, how is this going? Is it going to keep going well, or is it just going to like be nothing? And so there's this whole thing, and then you go on maybe a couple more dates, and depending on like how fast you move and all of that, but you get into like the fling, like the first like strong fling part of the relationship, like the where you spend the night, and then maybe you see each other like pretty soon after that, and it turns into this thing. And what can happen, and I've definitely done this, and learned from it, is that you just want to keep going up. Yeah. And so you want to keep spending more time with that person, and more time, and so you keep texting, and you keep kind of making plans, and you keep spending time, and then there comes a point where there's just a natural peak, and then it's time to come down. And it's so difficult for people
to acknowledge that,
to acknowledge that, and to say, okay, let's go and like digest. And like this would be like a kind of sane approach. It's like, wow, like there's part of me that wants to keep hanging out, but I actually think it's time to take a little space, and I just want to digest. And this has been really amazing, and I'm not going far, but I need to go and kind of just sit back in my own life for a minute and feel myself before kind of going on the next wave with you, right? But what people do instead is they kind of up the ante, they up the stakes. Like, okay, well,
to get more sensation and more of the up, because at that point there's no more juice.
Right.
So you've got to double down.
There's no more juice if you follow the natural evolution. The next thing is for the juice to kind of come down. But instead, people are like, well, let's artificially crank the juice by like, let's go away for the weekend.
Yeah.
Let's go away for the weekend. Like, what? Like, I know this is soon, but like, do you want to meet my parents? Like, all like that, right? Or like saying I love you. Like, I think oftentimes that first time someone says I love you is a reach, is one of those moments of like, it's actually time to take a minute, a breather. But and it doesn't mean it's not true, and it doesn't mean that those relationships don't kind of go on to be good relationships. But it's just this kind of like grasping beyond what life wants,
and an efforting.
Yeah, in an effortful way to keep the juice going, and then I think people move in together on this impulse, and people get married on this impulse, and people have kids on this impulse. Like, I think all of those things, like you said, like maybe you're a flap, like, not to specifically single out, like, I don't know the history of your conception at all, and I don't really want to speculate about it, but yeah, like.
And you're saying it on the positive, like the kind of best case scenario in terms of relationship land, but I think mostly what happens is it peaks and the energy starts going down, and people start freaking out, and relationships end.
That happens too, but the freak out, like if you go to this, like if you keep reaching, you like do the next step, the thing that you lose is rapport with yourself and rapport with life, and there's a bad feeling that comes into the exchange, and so it still looks good, and your mind is satisfied because like, okay, I'm still in control of the situation, we're still going forward, but there's like some part of you starts to die inside. Like, that's what it feels like, or it's like that there's like a darkness that comes online in the connection, and then what that can turn into is fights.
Yes.
and hurt feelings, and or just like crashes, like someone just going down, and then like if you're not going to fight, then maybe what happens is you get codependent, and like one person gets really attached to the other person being okay, and the other person goes really down, and they need that one person to help, and like all of that can come from that as well if you don't just get into a fight straight away. Like the other ways, it can just go down and you stay together a bit too long and you get into a fight.
Right. Yeah, I think
so
relationships is the number one place. Maybe that's just my map, but the number one place where flapping is happening because of that saving. Because the relationship does have such a quality of projection and saving each other to it.
Yeah.
That and career. Yeah, I guess. Money and partnership.
There's something, I think the difference is that career and money, their natural home is the up. And relationship, actually the natural home of relationship is the down. Like sex lives in the down. You can defy life in your career, and you can kind of push against life to a certain extent, and you can get a lot of success, and you can push against these natural currents, and you can actually create a lot of success in career world. But in relationship world, you can't do that at all. Like as soon as you start doing that, it just goes bad one way or another. So I think that might be why, like, I also have that emphasis that, like, the place where this is most important, I think, is in relationship. Both romantic relationship, but also in friendships, like, you know, all kind of relationships. Okay, so that's flapping, and that's the down.
I'm still thinking about whether a relationship lives in the down. I don't know if I agree. Because I think relationship is so creative. So I do think relationship is the creativity and the energy of relationship. Yeah, the power comes from the down, from the intimacy, from the messy, from the, suffering each other's humanity, like that place. We get the juice and the power to go back up. But I think relationship is so creative. So, which is very up. So I don't, but maybe you're saying home base. Whereas career,
let me. I'm not sure, so I will retract my kind of convicted statement earlier. But what I'll say is, like, in relationship, it's most important to follow that flow.
Yes.
Whether it's up or down. Whereas career, you can kind of like, it's good to follow that flow, but you can also kind of like muscle through it.
Okay, that makes sense. That totally lands for me then.
So the next question is, what do we do instead of flapping? When it's that moment of you've peaked and it's time to come down, and you feel maybe a little fear, maybe a little kind of like mental reach for something else that can kind of like give you that next thing. Oh, I just want to name something. Keith Paolino said something really amazing on it. I was watching his show the other day, and he said something really amazing. He quoted, I'm sorry, I cannot remember who he was quoting, but maybe I'll go look it up for the notes. But he quoted someone who's an addiction researcher, and basically he paraphrased, and Keith has the same training as us in this stuff, and he paraphrased this researcher, and I'm going to paraphrase him, saying addiction is what happens when you hit a peak, but you have scarcity mentality. So you hit a peak, you feel really good, but your mind thinks, I can't have this again. This is like, there's scarcity of having this again. And so that's where that reach goes for the next high and the next high and the next high. And so really, like, there's this spectrum, and like on the extreme side, it becomes these like life-destroying addictions, but we're all doing versions of that anytime that we're not just like allowing ourselves to go down. So I just think that's really interesting, that it's the combination of a peak with a scarcity mentality and this fear that I can't have this again, or I can't have more of this ever.
Yep.
And so I gotta keep going.
Which is why breakups are the best thing ever. Because they teach you against all of your will and against everything that you want. They take you to the bottom, the down, the ultimate down, and you learn in that place you can be happy again. You can have love again. And this is my thing about the tea. I can't give up. I'm totally in addiction. I'm totally in scarcity because I don't actually trust my life right now to deliver me into as joyful of a place without it. which is crazy. But in relationship land, I actually feel that way because I've been so far down in breakup land before, and I've gotten myself out, and I know joy exists no matter what my relationship status is. Like I know that deep in my bones. And I'll still fight for relationship, and I'll still like advocate, and I'll still go for it because I love sex and intimacy and the whole thing. And I know that I'm okay without it. And I'll still want it, but I trust my life deeply in that place, and I don't feel love addicted at all anymore. But tea addicted, I totally feel.
One thing at a time.
Yeah, one thing at a time. Baby steps.
Yeah, I love that. The like part of what the down gives you is it liberates you from that fear.
Yes, it really does.
Okay, so you feel yourself, you hit that peak, and then you feel yourself going down. It's in a relationship. You feel like, I don't actually want to spend another night with this person, but if I don't, then maybe they'll go away, or like whatever that thing is, like, you know, or just whatever kind of peak you hit, and then you start to feel that feeling of like, you know, I think it's time to like to do something different and to change the mode. What do you do?
So if it was not relational and it was just in a personal moment that didn't impact anybody else, I would, as soon as I could, notice what I was feeling and noticing my experience. This happens to me every month on my cycle. Oh, okay, I'm going down. And instead of flapping and eating more chocolate and like being more productive, and it's like naming that to myself, I'm going down. And then kind of coming back to that question that we always talk about from Carl Buchheit as well. What would you like? What would you like? And so then it's like following your nose with what's actually gonna, you know, what's actually gonna take care of yourself, what's actually gonna be good.
And I think that this is a place where I might, and this I'm sorry to interrupt, but I might adjust that question because like we have so much depth in that question. What would you like? But I think on the surface that can be a tool for the flapping to get back in.
Right, where it's like, well, I want him to call me back. Ah.
Right. So I think maybe a more down. Yeah, there you go. What would feel good?
What would feel good to me? Truly, what would feel good? What would feel really good?
And it's like a body thing.
It is a body thing. It is a total body thing.
It's not because like, and that's another, like the body lives in the down and the mind lives in the up. Like this. So part of going down is attending to the body.
And that question, that will take me right into tears usually. Like, oh, I just need to cry. I need to go cry. And it doesn't mean anything. We don't need, I mean, I have a lot of practice. I think in the beginning, I would go into these like epic downs with like tears and like making art and writing poems, you know, like I'm a poet actually. And now it's more like, oh, I just need to cry for 10 minutes and like do a little laundry and just not try to do my email for a second. And then in relationship land, I mean, part of the amazing part of relationship is that we are impacted by somebody else and we are having an impact, which I think is this really, really amazing experience. And the downside is we have an impact and all of our choices impact the other person. So,
and also we're impacted.
And we are impacted. Yeah. So I think the best way in relationship land is to do the same thing, but just communicate it to the other person, naming it and what would feel good to me. And I think, from studying attachment, if you're in a relationship, if you're just starting dating, you haven't formed as much of an attachment. It doesn't need to be a huge thing. It can just be a, hey, heads up. I've had such a good time lately, and I know we've been in a lot of contact, and I need to take a few days to work and exercise, and you can say it in your own language, but just be in my own life. And I'll be back, I'll check in a few days, or I'm just letting you know so you don't worry because I really have had a good time or whatever. If that's true, ideally. And if you're in a relationship with more attachment, then, I mean, I guess it's the same thing actually. But you do want to kind of say that you're coming back to not freak the other person out, to create more secure attachment. But the naming it, right? Like the main point is naming it and taking care of yourself as soon as you possibly can so that you don't start to go down and take the other person with you, which I have a lot of practice with that, especially every month, where you can, I think the huge temptation for me is when I'm going down is to figure out why I feel bad and then look around to my outside circumstances, career, relationship, or like maybe the way my body looks or something like that, and find a problem and then make it the other. So in relationship, it's really tempting to make it the other person's problem. Like, either with criticism or complaints, basically.
You're not doing this right. You're not helping me this way. You're not giving me this.
All these things. And then the worst version of the down, I think, is when you are going down and then you bring the other person that is ideally like your support system, and you bring them down. And then you're both just like,
oh man,
hating each other, needing space, not allowed to ask for space because then it's going to trigger even more tears. And you're just stewing in this bad place. Nobody can help anybody, and it's all your fault. That's the worst. So I highly recommend
not doing that.
Yeah, and you do that enough times and you don't do it anymore. I mean, the good thing about life is that it teaches us without needing to know any of this. Like, if we're humans, we're going to learn this. The more we pay attention, the faster we learn. So I've done that so many times that it is so not tempting, as it's just not as tempting. And I've gotten a little, that Leonard Cohen, like the light has gotten in that crack a few times where I've been able to say, the training wheels was being able to totally rail against the relationship and my partner and say, and I'm a total hot mess, or, I'm going down. This is not about you. And you can kind of like get that little language in. And then eventually you actually know that it's not about the other person and you don't even do it.
You just gave me flashbacks to moments in relationships where we've both been very, very, very down, and it's just been a bad place.
Yeah. This happens with fights too, with relationship. Like, if you're in a fight, that usually means like it's time to go down. And I've also noticed that you can, once you start to go down and you've started bringing the other person down, and then what naturally happens is the other person, especially if you're in, I have most of my experience with heterosexual relationship with men, like men need to process by themselves usually a lot. Like, they need to actually go and take, if you get into a conflict, like, I want to keep talking, get to the better place. And the man usually needs to actually go away and resource himself and then come back, and then he can kind of repair or whatever. But the temptation when you're going down is to just keep trying and like keep like contorting yourself into like all these pretzel moves and like trying to be, and it's so counterintuitive, but the best thing you can do is walk away and take care of yourself. Like, no matter where you are on the going down cycle, no matter how bad it is, even if you're almost at the hit bottom, the other person hates you, it's so tempting to talk about it more and try to make it better and effort go up, but just let yourself go all the way down and take space and take care of yourself.
I'm just wondering, like, how do you know when it's time to talk about it again?
When you feel differently, when you have love in your heart that's back. When you have kindness, when you've reached a place of like, I mean, for me, it's like self-awareness and responsibility. Like, when I'm fully taking responsibility for my own experience, like I can name what happened, and my adult is fully, I'm not like a crying 4-year-old.
Yeah, when the adult is back, I like that.
And sometimes it's not perfect, sometimes you're still like a weepy baby, but you can request something that the other person's available for.
Right, there's like a
and
little...
You can help each other.
Right, there's like a little kind of... There's a sense of there's a sense that the other person has a way to win here.
Yes.
As opposed to like, there's just no way to win, and we're just going down together.
Yes.
Hand in unlovable hand, as the mountain goats say.
Yes. And it doesn't have to be a week of space. It can be 10 minutes. I've done that so many times. Go to the bathroom, get myself together, come back, apologize, ask for what I need.
A couple more practical things. So the general header of this is come down pleasurably.
Yeah.
There's also Nicole and friends taught us that one. So come down pleasurably. So, that really means like asking yourself like, what would feel good, and doing that, and like pleasurable body things. So we've given examples like just getting in bed and binge watching TV is a pretty decent way to come down. Making out and sex can be great if you have that available. Taking a bath, like going for walks, like getting cozy. Like the down is kind of, it can be cozy, it can be womb like if you get it right. Like taking your attention off of like the kind of broader vision of your life and putting it onto like the immediate moment and the felt experience, because oftentimes when you're in the down, when you go reach for that broader vision, it can just be like scary or bleak.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, again, like this is a cultural thing. Like our culture is so attached to like this vision of our life and looking at that broader vision of our life, that we just have this habit of doing that. And I think part of the lesson of the down is to just let go of that for a while. And this is when in AA, right, they say one day at a time. Like this is why, like, and I hope my mom doesn't mind. I'll share a story, like when she was really going through it, and when I was young and she was a single mom and she was with this other single mom. And what they talked about was like, and this is more like, this is coping with like a major down. And what they talked about is, if I can do one thing today,
Yep, just
it
one
was
thing.
a good day. Just like, let me just get one thing, and then that's a good day, and that's enough. So if I can just do laundry today,
Mm-hmm.
if I can just do grocery shopping today, like that's enough. And like that kind of attitude of like, I'm not trying to figure out my whole life, and I'm not trying to like, yeah, there you go. But just like, I'm just here in this moment of my life, and a lot of that comes with, and it's feeling, and it's being with the body, and it's doing things that are good for the body.
Mm-hmm. I love 12 step so much. It's like 12 step is another thing that's like, when you're at the ultimate down, there are homes all over the world of people that will not tell you that you're broken and will actually just let you talk. It's
Mm-hmm.
They've got a few things, like they've got 12 step has a I'm not giving it my full recommendation because there's a little bit of like a pathological, there's something wrong with me going on in there, but that's okay, because it's like sometimes that's to save lives. So but they do have language in the down, and they do create community in the down, and I think community is so helpful. If you have any friends that don't flap when you go down, that don't try to get you to keep flapping, those friends that are like, oh, but you're fine. You're totally fine. Oh, but
or just like, well, what about okay, what if we do this?
Yeah.
Like, you know what?
Oh,
you need to,
okay.
let's do a makeover. Like, we're gonna wash that man right out of your
have you
head.
exercised? No, let's get some exercise. And I mean, I'm guilty of this sometimes. It's like, God bless everybody. We want to fix it and help people. It's hard to watch people suffering and going down. It's hard. And the more rapport we have with ourselves going down, the more we can hold that space for other people. And so if you have, I mean, that's my main way of going. When I'm going down, my main tool is crying at the altar and letting God witness me in the down, but then getting on the phone immediately with a female friend who will not tell me that, will not try to put Band-Aids on my experience, and will let me cry. I mean, that's like my saving grace, is the women down there. And cleaning. Oh my God, cleaning.
I don't do that one, but
I love cleaning.
It makes a lot of sense.
So helpful, because you can do something, but it's not about getting anywhere. It's just, I don't know. It's nurturing. You're cleaning your space.
Right. It's like an immediate thing, not a kind of, yeah.
And it's movement, right? It's a body based. It's movement.
Right.
It's not cleaning your inbox. That's different than cleaning your room. Oh God, the relief.
So that's kind of like how to relate to it. The main point is we get the mistaken idea that we're supposed to be somewhere in this cycle. We're supposed to be a certain point on the wave. But you can't stay at one point on the wave. Instead, what you can do is you can be in rapport with wherever you actually are at on the wave. And that actually allows you to not be stuck. That allows you to keep moving up and down, and not, yeah. And so be in rapport. So it's kind of like there's a version of being up, which is out of rapport, and there's a version of being down, which is out of rapport, and there's a version of up which is in rapport, and there's a version of down which is in rapport. And so like just kind of noticing which way you are, where you are, and kind of working to get in rapport with that point you are on the wave. Because there's also what's funny. I'll just mention this briefly, but like there are people that flap a lot, but there's another thing which I'm going to call churning, which is where
let's talk about those people.
so with churning, it's the opposite of flapping. Churning is where you go down and then you stay down and you get stuck in the down, you get fixated, and you just keep feeling more feelings and like and like the kind of emo, like that version of Leonard Cohen where you just kind of like go down into the dark place and you never come back and you just like life is terrible and like you get fixated on the down. And you just want to churn and you want to keep feeling bad feelings and keep putting fuel on the fire. And there are reasons for that, and we can't get into all of like the mechanism for that. It's kind of easier to understand flapping in a certain way than churning, but people churn as much as they flap, and so that's a whole other podcast. But I guess the reason that we want to put it in this one is because like, okay, if we're saying go down, that's great, but like don't stay there, like.
No, don't stay there and try to get extra. You'll know when you're trying to stay there because you want pity. I think.
You
want pity and you want people to notice. You're pouting. You want pity.
Or you're just like even if it's not people, but it's God. You're like, God, look up my pain.
Yes.
Like and that's another thing that Carl Buchheit talks about is that what does he call it? An owie, an owie, where you basically, I can't remember what it stands for. It stands for something because Carl's a ridiculous person. But the idea of that is like, look at my pain, and if you can just be in enough pain, God will see you and take pity on you and bring you out of it Himself.
Yeah,
like
if you have no authority over your own life.
Yeah, overriding, will invalidating. Extortion. That's what he says for overriding, will invalidating extortion. He's a ridiculous person. It's very funny. But you're extorting God. You're saying like, I'm in so much pain. Like God, like look at this. And really, it's a projection that God is a parent and that it's God's job to help you. And according to Carl's model, which I think is really useful in this moment, God's job is just to ask you what you would like and then respond. But you're not in a conversation with God about what you would like in that moment. You're in a conversation with God about how terrible it is so that He can just fix it. Anyway, so that's churning. We're not going to get more into churning right now. But I just want to tell like a little story. I've just had this experience. I've had this experience of being. It's funny. I was kind of maybe like 3 or 4 months after a breakup. Of a relationship that was I think it was a 3.5 year relationship, very, very beautiful and very challenging relationship. And I was at the end of that, and I was actually staying at her house. She was house sitting for someone, and then she was away for a few weeks, and I was kind of house sitting, or I don't know how you would say that, but I was actually staying there. And it was out in Fairfax, California. It was out in like. And I didn't know anyone. It's funny, now I know a million people live in Fairfax, California, but I didn't know anyone at that time. And I was staying in this house, and it was like I didn't have a car. It was like a 20-minute walk to the grocery store into the town where I could get anything. And I was just very lonely and kind of heartbroken. And just just going down. And I was like really in the down. I was lonely and heartbroken, and I had no idea what I was doing with my life. I can't remember where I was career-wise at that point, but I was feeling like, I don't know, like that if I tried to put my attention on, I was trying to like build a new phase of my life, but any attention I would put on like longer than a day was just like, I had nothing. And so, and I was trying to listen to, to Abraham, to Esther Hicks. Who doesn't know anything about the down at all. That is not a good person to listen to when you're in the down. But I was like clutching. I mean, maybe it was. I don't know. But
no,
like,
it's not.
Okay.
It's Lynn only when you want to go up. When you have a moment where you're like really actually ready and you have a little bit of juice, then you start listening to Abraham. Otherwise, she's wildly out of rapport.
And she's a rocket ship straight up. Like, I mean, whee! But anyway, I was listening to stuff, and I remember, I just have this memory of like lying on this bed, and this is just one example. Like, I've had versions of this experience many times. I'm sure everyone listening has, right? Like, we've all been there, right? But I had this experience of lying in bed in this house by myself, and just like letting myself go down, and kind of like a little bit just saying okay, but there was some way of reaching for help, but I don't really know how to say that, but I just like it's like I just like let my heart be available for help, and there was this experience of angels coming and tending to my heart.
Mm. Mm.
And it wasn't like it made me better and I kind of woke up 10 minutes later and I was like alive and well and like, okay, let's go do this, and I got it all, like I know the plan. It was like there was still months of recovery actually, and kind of gradually kind of piecing things together. But that was a moment of, and this is what Catherine McCune talks about. She doesn't call them angels at the bottom. She's a bit weird about the things that are at the bottom, but she says there are beings at the bottom who are there to help you, and part of what they're there to help you do is to let go. And my experience was just, there were angels came and tended to my heart. So, yeah. And as I was thinking about that, I remembered this quote, which comes from. It's apparently it's misattributed, but it comes from the movie Jacob's Ladder, which is a very strange, beautiful horror movie. I don't even know if you would call it a horror movie, but it has a lot of horrible things in it. But it's brilliant. Anyway, Jacob's Ladder, I strongly recommend it. And there's a scene where his chiropractor, he's seeing his chiropractor, and his chiropractor quotes Meister Eckhart, who is a Christian mystic, kind of Middle Ages Christian mystic. And so this is the quote from Jacob's Ladder, which apparently is not a very good translation, but it's still just brilliant. The only thing that burns in hell is the part of you that won't let go of your life. Your memories, your attachments. They burn them all away. But they're not punishing you. They're freeing your soul. If you're frightened of dying and you're holding on, you'll see devils tearing your life away. But if you've made your peace, the devils are really angels freeing you from the earth.
Oh my God.
So that's there is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. It's like this is the medicine of the down. And then I have one more quote. You ready for one more quote? Just piling it on.
One more quote, everybody.
I got one more, which I don't know how this one will live, but this is from Marianne Woodman.
If you take us any further down than the last quote, then you will paint me into a corner that I know exactly how to get out of.
No, it's going to be okay. Okay. So this is Marianne Woodman, just to finish us off. She's a Jungian psychiatrist. This is from a book, something about love. Once you have explored the depths, don't wallow in them. It's not only boring, it's destructive. Let grace enter. It brings with it a new understanding of love. So let grace enter. There you go.
That's good.
That's Marianne Woodman.
Brought us a little bit more to a resting place. That's interesting.
Okay.
That's partly what you're practicing right now in your life. Is not,
oh, yeah.
You spend so many years in the down. For good reasons, with many benefits, and you are trying something else.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it got boring and destructive for me, for sure. I'm much more of a wallower than a flapper, or a churner than a flapper. So, yeah. So that's but I have flap as well. I mean, everybody does it.
Everybody does both. Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
thanks for listening, you guys. I hope that this has been helpful and not too much of a heavy trip.
I remember when I learned about all this, I was like, oh, this is how I could have a life that's like more like these romantic songs and movies and things. Because I was so habituated in the up, just moving from one thing to the next constantly. And when I learned the down, I felt like I got connected to this whole other part of the world. Like, oh, this is where songs come from, and poetry and these heartbreaking movies. And I remember feeling, and I still do, I feel more connected to the world, knowing, like letting myself go to this other territory.
I've gone back through old journals, and the times when I'm in the down, I write some of the best poetry. Like
Oh,
it's like, oh wow. Okay.
okay.
That's the show.